Before we vote on the final motion, I'd like to yield to the gentleman from Oklahoma for any concluding remarks he'd like to make.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to agree with my friend, Mr. Desagnier. This is a sad day. I don't think anybody in this panel, Democrat or Republican, came here with the expectation they'd be voting on impeachment for the president, and I think they all regret that. I think we all regret that. But I want to tell you first, Mr. Chairman, I'm very proud of this committee. I'm very proud that the discussion has been civil and professional. I think the points have been fair by all sides, and I think that's to the credit of this committee. And Mr. Chairman, I'm very proud of you. I think you've presided over this process, which is a difficult one. It's one where we clearly disagree. There was not much opportunity for agreement to arrive, but you've given everybody an opportunity to have their say. You've allowed every question to be asked, every point to be made. You've made your decisions. That's your prerogative as the chairman, and we respect that prerogative. But I think you've done so in a very fair and open and transparent manner, and for that I'm personally very, very grateful. I do think, as a Congress, we're on an awfully dangerous and awfully divisive course. And I've thought about this quite a bit. I know all of us have. And I've been around this business for a long time. And I've watched the last impeachment process. I was not a member of Congress, but I was pretty closely associated with Congress at the time. And I thought probably where we went wrong in that process is that I don't think most of the Republican members in the 90s ever really regarded President Clinton as a legitimately elected president. I would caution my friends, I think you're making precisely the same mistake now. There's no question we can quibble about votes, but many members of Congress on your side have been trying to impeach the president from the very first day. No question about that. There were testimony about that. And we're going to impeach a president in this case, if we go ahead and we have the vote tomorrow, for something that didn't happen. The dispute has been about aid to the Ukraine. That aid was given, and it was withheld at the most for 55 days and was delivered within the time legally specified. That is before the end of the fiscal year. There were no investigations undertaken by the Ukraine in exchange for that aid or in exchange for time at the White House or visit with the president. And both the principals involved in the critical conversation, President Trump and President Zelensky, all said everything was fine. No pressure was intended, none was felt. This process that we're engaged in, Mr. Chairman, is going to fail. I mean, we'll have a vote tomorrow. It may well succeed. You occupy the majority here. I respect that. But we're here because I think the Speaker did not follow the very conditions she laid down at the beginning. She said, we will not go down the road of impeachment unless it's bipartisan. This is not bipartisan. We will not go down this road unless there's a consensus in the country. There is no consensus in the country. And we are precisely, or a little bit less than that now, 11 months from an election where the American people can and will make this decision. But I want to conclude, Mr. Chairman, on a little bit more optimistic note. A lot of people would say that means Congress is broken. And we've focused, and I think the public will focus mostly on this measure today. But we ought to reflect a little bit about what's happened this week and what's happened in this committee that we saw last night. We had a major bipartisan agreement on funding the government for the balance of the year. It was a give and take process. By the way, the president was pretty integral in that process as well. So he's participated. We can't pass much. If he's not willing to sign it, he's not willing to negotiate. He certainly did. We're going to have major tax changes. 3 major items that fund the ACA were eliminated today. I'm very, very pleased with that. The president was involved in that. We're going to have a tax extenders package that we all stayed here a little bit late last night, later than any of us wanted. But that's because the principals on all sides were actually negotiating. So that tells me that things are going in a workable fashion. And we're going to have a USMCA vote on Thursday. that, again, this committee was involved in, and I think will be bipartisan. So while I'm very disappointed about what's happening, I don't think it's good for the country. I think my friend Mr. Collins made some very, very good points about lowering the bar for impeachment and setting us up to engage in this again. I am pleased to say that in a number of areas we've been awfully functional, and I think in a very bipartisan manner. And, Mr. Chairman, that's in part because of the manner in which you've operated this process, a very divisive process, but one, again, in which I think you've been open and fair and transparent. We haven't agreed with all your decisions. You had the opportunity tonight to accept 2 fantastic amendments, but the reality is you allowed those amendments to be offered. You treated them with respect and fairly, and so for that I extend my sincere appreciation, and we look forward to seeing you on the floor tomorrow and appreciate the manner in which you discharge your duties here in this committee.
Well, thank you, and I want to thank the gentleman from Oklahoma for his kind words, and I want to thank all the members of this committee, Democrats and Republicans, and all the staff that have put in long hours during this week, but who have sat here all day and conducting themselves in a very serious and thoughtful manner. I had a number of people say to me that they were surprised that despite the difficult topic before us, that what they observed play out on TV was relatively civil. And so I'm proud of this committee, too. And we have strong disagreements over the matter at hand. I think the president behaved in a way that is reprehensible, quite frankly. And yeah, he did, the aid did go to Ukraine, but only after he got caught withholding it. You know, while this committee was meeting this afternoon, the President of the United States sent the Speaker of the House a letter on this impeachment process. And Ms. Lesko earlier asked unanimous consent to put it in the record. I'm not sure how many of you read it, but it's 6 pages long, and it essentially amounts to one long Twitter rant. He calls impeachment an illegal coup, and he claims, quote, more due process was afforded to those accused in the Salem witch trials, end quote. I mean, are you kidding me? Innocent people were tortured and hung. Their corpses were thrown in shallow graves. An 80-year-old farmer named Giles Corey was literally placed between boards and crushed to death. I mean, for the president to say that he is being treated worse than the Salem witch trials is unhinged, just like so many of the missives on impeachment. Now, I know a little bit about the Salem witch trials because I'm from Massachusetts. And here's a little more history about Massachusetts. It was our forebears who were killed in the Boston Massacre and who fired the shot heard around the world at Lexington and Concord. It was our Commonwealth that stood up to a tyrannical king and insisted that rights come from the consent of the governed and not the whims of a monarch. In his letter, the president even writes, and I quote, "I have no doubt that the American people will hold you and the Democrats fully responsible in the 2020 election," end quote. The president just doesn't get it. This is not about his reelection. It's not about anyone's political future. Our founders handed us a fragile thing more than 200 years ago, an experiment in self-government, a fledgling democracy unlike anything else on earth at the time, a republic of, by, and for the people. So this is about whether we, the people sent to Congress, are willing to stand up and protect that fragile idea that has been entrusted to all of us. You know, we shape this democracy day by day, vote by vote. Some votes are more arcane than others, but each and every one helps to decide the kind of country we're going to be. You know, voting on impeachment is particularly important. It will define our democracy from here on out. You know, not a single Republican today even hinted that what the president did was wrong. It was wrong. It was wrong. And for me, I will leave here today with a clear conscience. You know, I don't know if President Trump is watching right now, but if he were, I would say to him, Mr. President, this is not about you. This is about all of us. What kind of behavior we're willing to tolerate from whoever sits in the Oval Office, and whether we live up to the ideal of a government of, by, and for the people. You know, a republic, if you can keep it. I began this hearing by quoting those famous words from Benjamin Franklin. You know, no one wanted to be here today, but I am proud that when history called upon us, we fought to keep the vision of our founders alive in our time. We fought to keep this republic intact. So, this has been a long day, and tomorrow promises to be a long day. Even though we had disagreements in this committee, as I said before, I'm proud of each and every member of this committee. I mean, I think, showed that you can actually have difficult discussions and be civil and be serious. And I think, no matter where we fall on this issue, I think that's something we all should be proud of. So I thank everybody, and now I ask that the question is now on the motion offered by the gentlewoman from Pennsylvania, Ms. Scanlon. All those in favor will say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to.
Now we would ask for the yeas.
The yeas and nays have been requested. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Hastings.
Aye.
Mr. Hastings, aye. Mrs. Torres. Aye. Mrs. Torres, aye. Mr. Perlmutter. Aye. Mr. Perlmutter, aye. Mr. Raskin.
Aye.
Mr. Raskin, aye. Ms. Scanlon.
Aye.
Ms. Scanlon, aye. Mr. Morelli.
Aye.
Mr. Morelli, aye. Ms. Shalala.
Aye.
Ms. Shalala, aye. Mr. DeSaulnier.
Aye.
Mr. DeSaulnier, aye. Mr. Cole.
No.
Mr. Cole, no. Mr. Woodall. No. Mr. Woodall, no. Mr. Burgess. No. Mr. Burgess, no. Mrs. Lesko. Mrs. Lesko, no. Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, aye.
The clerk report the total.
9 yeas, 4 nays.
The ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. Accordingly, I will manage this rule for the majority.
And I will manage it for the Republicans.
Again, I thank everybody, and without
Can I make one additional point?
absolutely.
Just for the record,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, when we talk about democracy and the federal system, we ought to remember the Iroquois Confederacy. There were people
Absolutely.
here even before our brave
I agree-
forebears
I
in
agree.
Massachusetts
I agree with
that understood something about
I agree
democracy
with
and federalism.
I
Thank
agree
you.
with you. Thank you. Without objection, the committee is adjourned.